or the daughters Laney's?
No.
Laney and Ashlyn and Layla. Are there anything involving them?
No.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, Mr. Rames, do you have any questions?
I do. Ms. Matthews, you've mentioned having previously been investigated by Children's Protective Services. When was the last investigation that you were subject to?
My last case was closed 2 weeks ago, and that would be the domestic violence case between me and Sean.
And you have previously offered some testimony about that matter, and I believe you indicated that you had been pushed by Mr. Dillon, and that I think that it was the minor child Wayne who was present during that altercation that occurred between you and Mr. Dillon. Am I correct?
That's not correct. Wayne was not in the home.
I beg your pardon? I couldn't hear you.
Wayne was not in the home.
All right. Do you have a child with Mr. Dillon that is a child by the name of Carter? Is that correct?
Yes.
Carter would have been present during the altercation that occurred between you and Mr. Dillon. Is that right?
Yes, he was in his crib.
Your living arrangements, do you continue to live in the same home that in Hillsdale on Bacon Road that you've been at during the course of these proceedings over these 3 or 4 hearings?
Yeah, until the end of July. I have a new lease with the renter. She had a verbal lease until August. So she really legally has until August. She was trying to move out previously just to help me out. So yeah.
All right, so ma'am, as I'm understanding it, Dillon, the person whom you were involved in the domestic violence with, first of all, he is the father of the child, Carter, that we just referenced, correct?
Yes.
Sean Dillon owns the home where you're living and you have no legal interest in that home, correct?
Correct.
And you're aware of the orders in this case prohibiting the children from having any contact with Mr. Dillon, the person in whose home you live, right?
Correct.
And you're planning on leaving Mr. Dillon. Well, you've already indicated, I think, that you planned on being out of his house by April 1st. Isn't that correct?
I did, but I showed up to my house and the renter had not moved yet.
Okay. So it is your intention to live separate from Mr. Dillon permanently. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you recall at the beginning of June, as in last month, that Mr. Dillon proposed marriage to you and you accepted?
No.
You are not engaged to Mr. Dillon at this time?
No.
Okay. The other change, I believe, that has happened since we were last here, there has been an order that's been entered in the separate case involving your son, Wayne, where he has been taken from your possession. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so Wayne's no longer living with you. The girls are no longer living with you. The only child that's with you is Carter, whom you have with Mr. Dillon.
Correct.
Has Mr. Dillon started some type of a custody action against you?
No.
Is that because you and he are getting along just fine?
We've moved on, yes.
Are the two of you sharing the residence together when you don't have the girls with you on the weekends?
No.
Who is your caseworker or investigator through Child Protective Services regarding this most recent investigation that closed 2 weeks ago?
I'm unsure. I'd have to look.
Was it an investigator by the name of Samantha Rodriguez?
Yes.
Were there family team meetings that you had with Ms. Rodriguez?
That I was there, yes, but there was no other family there.
Is there a recommendation that you received from CPS regarding this investigation that you live separate from Mr. Dillon?
We had discussed it, yes, but that was my plan anyway.
Just so we're clear, CPS has recommended that you not live with Mr. Dillon, correct?
No, they never recommended that. We just discussed it.
Or what are the recommendations that CPS has for you at this time?
That we follow the don't contact orders until they're dropped.
Follow the no contact orders, meaning that you and Mr. Dillon have no contact with each other?
Correct, and there's girls as well.
Okay, and the reason you're not having any contact with Mr. Dillon, at least in part, is because of the domestic violence case that remains pending against him in court?
Correct, it's standard that they open a no contact order when there's a domestic violence.
All right, so I realize there's the no contact order, but this is Mr. Dillon's home that you live in. Has Mr. Dillon been attempting to reoccupy his own home?
No, his family said I can stay as long as I need.
It's his family. This is not a home owned by Mr. Dillon, but rather by one of his other family members?
He's purchasing it.
All right, so the home you're living in is owned not by Mr. Dillon, but rather by Mr. Dillon's parents?
What's the relevance
I
to
would
this,
assume-
Judge? She's gonna move out, move in her own home when the renters are evicted. She's
That's
waiting.
fine. I'll withdraw the question. Are you, So I presume, based on the order that was entered in your case with Mr. Corser, you're not participating in any, at this time, in any kind of counseling as it relates to Wayne?
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to discuss it. It's an open sexual assault case.
All right. So from what I understand from your answer then is that your son Wayne is being charged as a juvenile with a sexual assault offense. And is that against the minor child, in this case, Lainey?
No,
Nobody said that.
he's the victim, or Wayne would be the victim.
Okay. All right. Is there, in your mind, ma'am, is there a relationship between Wayne being a victim of a sexual assault offense and Wayne not being in your custody because of a court order being entered?
No,
Is it your understanding that Wayne was victimized while he was in your care?
no,
Do you understand who is alleged to be the perpetrator of that offense against your son?
yes.
Who is that?
Am I allowed to, I don't feel comfortable with answering that. Do I have to answer that?
Yeah, I'm not, right now, she's given a lot of information about her kids.
Is that an objection, Mr. Leon, to the question?
Yes. I'm sorry, Judge, what?
Well, I'm just saying, are you objecting to the
I
question
am objecting to the question.
in the basis of your objection?
Well, the base of the objection is that she's giving information or making statements on a possible criminal investigation of her children. She doesn't really know. She doesn't want to make any statements of love.
So are you answering on her behalf or
I'm
the
advised
response?
to answer that.
All right, Mr. Raines, the response to Mr. Leon's objection?
Judge, I think if I don't have an answer to that question, I'm going to request very seriously that this court consider there be no contact between these children and the mother. I think it's reasonable for my client to understand who may have perpetrated an offense against the child who is under her care when he has children with Miss Matthews. My client would want to know who that person is. That person certainly should be prohibited from having any contact with these children. We have already identified in the existing court order 2 persons who should have no contact with these children. And it would seem as if we need to know of somebody else who should. I don't know what the reservation is by Miss Matthews of disclosing somebody who's victimized her child. We can take that off the record if we need to, but I still would want to know that.
Mr. Leon, I would think the name of that person would be relevant for these proceedings. I can go
I have
off,
no objection.
I can go off of YouTube Live if you would wish, and then
Yeah, that's